Welcome, one and all, to the Tabletop Call-In Show. It is presented by HaveYouPlayedThis.com. That's us. I'm Adam Bell. I'm joined, of course, by...
Jeremy Gage!
That's right. And we're here to chat games with each other, with you. If you want to call in, we can go ahead and slam that. Let's make sure this chat bot still works. It's been a minute. Great. Yeah, welcome to the Tabletop Call-In Show. You can go to that Discord. It didn't work. That's fine.
Didn't work.
You'll have to do it the
fine.
hard way and type it from the screen. Nothing I could do about it. I am Adam Bell, game designer, game talker. Find me on Twitter at AdamyBell or my games at adamybell.games, which really, really soon will be a real website. I've been working on it hard. I'm tired of working on websites. I should just do it the easy way and use a platform, but I fucking won't. Jeremy, who are you?
I'm Jeremy. I'm Jeremy Gage. Welcome, everyone. Good time zone to all those. Thanks for being here, C. Framin. Hello, Real Meat Castle. What up, Eli? What up, Matt? What up, BLG? Randy Lubin? Anyone else who hasn't said hello yet, thanks for being here. You can find me, if this is your first time, at JeremyGage5 over on Twitter, or you can listen to the podcast I host, Draw Your Dice, where we talk to really cool indie game designers about how to make games.
Yeah, great. We can watch videos that I've made so far. One of them at HaveYouPlayedThis.com. Yeah. And get the games
news. Did it. We have a thing.
Yeah, go get the games news. It was supposed to go to your email last week, but I learned that Tiny Letter does not like Linktree links. So, Jeremy, note to self, don't put those in the next newsletter, because Tiny Letter will just eat it and not send it to anybody. So go to the website if you didn't see that last week. Pain in the ass. It's Valentine's Day. You believe that?
That's right. Adam, I love you.
I love you too, Jeremy. Go everybody go tell somebody that you love that you do. You know? Oh my god. We're back. Jeremy's back home. We're back to talk about games. Do we have anything? What do we got front loaded here that we could talk about real quick? Anything?
Front loaded?
We do banter before we take calls.
Yeah, if you missed the announcement last week, we launched a website, HaveYouPlayedThis.com, and our mascot is a weasel. So feel free to send in any fan art of me or Adam as weasel personas. Be happy to see it. I've also added the nickname Juicy Boy to myself, so you can call me that in the chat. That's fine. We're going to work on those emotes, because as I'm saying this, I can imagine all the emotes we can do for that, and the hype train. Umbral Dive is on the way. You can hear the current state of battle design of Umbral Dive on the Draw Your Dice podcast. Adam, you have a success story brewing that's going to be like going nuclear in 24 hours.
Going nuclear. And by going nuclear, you mean... it's over. I'm running a Kickstarter. Go to kickstarter.adamybell.games. I'm sick of talking about it. Legend has it. It's good. It'll be coming to your door soon, but whatever. Have you played any games? What you been doing, Jeremy? I know what you've been doing because you've been in Pittsburgh. But we should talk about games. I'm sick of talking about us. Unless you got more to say.
I played Root for the first time with Adam while I was in Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. And I'm obsessed. So much so that as soon as I got home, I bought the base game and an expansion pack.
Cracked me up. Nothing cracks me up more than whenever I play a board game or something with a person and then find out that they immediately bought it.
It's good. Root is fucking good, dude. I like it a lot.
I'd like to play it more.
I played the there's a Marauders expansion, Adira. Also, hello, good time zone to Adira and Plumtree and Jimmy. But yeah, I played the Corvid Conspiracy. So Spencer, you'll probably see this on the VOD later. So shout out to the there's a Corvid faction route. We got to play it. I did real bad because I didn't really understand what I was doing, and that was unfortunate.
What's the deal?
Don't spread out your crows, people. It's bad news bears. It's a
What's the
bad
deal?
strategy.
How do the crows work? I haven't played. So for anybody that doesn't know, Root is a board game. Yeah, we pretend that we're RPG people, but we're also board game people. Uh, Whatever. And it is a board game that is fully asymmetric. It's fairly popular one, but popular in the sense that it's a popular board game in the niche of modern board games. We say popular on this show about anything, and it's not fucking true because nobody knows about any of this stuff. But um, yeah, it's really good. It is like basically hard to teach because every player is playing a completely different game that also happens to be balanced towards getting 30 points.
hmm
That's kind
hmm
of the whole thing. Um,
So the crows, they have plots. They're like trap cards. They're little tokens that have two sides, a face down side
mm,
and a face up side. And the expansion that they come in is the Underworld expansion. So you get the Duchy moles, and then you get the Corvid conspiracy. And they have the opposite problems. The crows can get a ton of card resources, but it's really hard for them to get warriors to stick on the map.
mm,
Whereas moles can get a ton of warriors on the map, but it's really hard for them to get like cards and resources. So for the Corvid conspiracy, you have four different types of plots or trap cards. You have a raid, which will spawn three warriors in adjacent clearings wherever the trap is triggered. Then you have bombs, which will destroy every enemy piece in that area if they trigger it. Then there's snares, which keep people from moving from that clearing. And they also can't spawn warriors in that clearing. And then the last one is extortion, where when it's flipped, you steal a card from every player that has a piece in that clearing, and then as long as the extortion card is face up or a token is face up, you get to draw an extra card at the end of your turn.
cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. It has a lot of you gotta do some mind game stuff because one of the actions for the crows, in addition to laying plots, is that you can swap plots on anywhere on the map. So you can swap face down tokens with face up tokens, and you can keep like maneuvering them around and playing this shell game, which is really cool. Love it. Love it.
Love it. Yeah, cool. I'll have to. Sasha's in the chat saying I got to get these expansions, so maybe I'll get to play these sooner than the next time I see you.
They're good. The river folk. When you mentioned the river folk one, I was like, "Oh, that's cool." I would love to play as a second vagabond. I love the vagabond. It's really cool. Um, but yeah, I looked it up online. Like, what's the best bang for your buck expansion? Everyone said Underworld, so I got that
Mhm.
one first.
Cool. Well, the callers are stacking. Perhaps it's time to talk to them.
Sure, I'm into it.
First caller is Discord user Randy Lubin. I don't know why I always say Discord user at the front. It's because sometimes people have usernames.
Yeah.
It just gets awkward whenever that display name is just the person's name, because then it's like, yeah, great. He uses Discord. Hello and welcome to the Tabletop Call-In Show.
Hello, hello. It is so good to see both of you.
Yeah,
I missed the
welcome.
last bunch of call-in shows, and it is great to be back in the community, in the vibe.
Yeah, welcome back.
I have a number of things to chat about today. Some like quick, excited to hype things, and then beyond that, we have a topic for possible open-ended discussion. Um, so first up, want to hype the StorySynth microgrant program presented by Big Bad Con. For any of you who haven't seen it, we got $30,000 in microgrant funding to give out to designers with marginalized identities to create games on StorySynth that use new forms of web monetization. So let me break all those components down. StorySynth is a free and open source browser-based platform for designing prompt-driven storytelling games like For the Queen. Great for first-time designers. You don't need to be technical. You just throw a bunch of prompts in a Google Sheet, paste the sheet link into storysynth.org, and it auto-builds a game that you can then share with friends and play in like a real-time multiplayer way. That is StorySynth. Big Bad Con, phenomenal convention organizer for storytelling games in the Bay Area, in California. And the grant program, we're giving out 100 grants of $300 each. You can find all the information about how to apply at bigbadcon.com, and there's a link to their info about the grants program page. We've already gotten, I think, 40 applicants. We're probably going to give funding to most, if not all of them, which means we have 60 left. We really just want people to show up and throw your ideas at us. We are going to be saying yes to almost everything. We're really just excited to be supporting new game designers experimenting. And we ourselves got the funding from an organization called Grant for the Web. They're trying to help people come up with ways of monetizing content online that aren't advertising. So I'm going to be adding some features to StorySynth that are like sort of tipping and micropayment online, so that you're like sending a small stream of like pennies as you play the game, things like that. So anyway, that was thing one to share, which is the StorySynth microgrant program. Again, you can go to bigbadcon.com to get more details there. I would love to see you all applying with your ideas.
Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Thing
a
number
good
two
thing
is
to
a
shout
very. Oh, go ahead, Adam.
I nothing. You got it. I was just
All
gonna
right.
say that's cool. That's a good thing to have
Yeah.
around.
And I'm happy. Anyone can find me on Twitter, Randy Lubin. Just DM me or at me with any questions. Happy to answer any questions about the application process and, of course, about designing StorySynth games too. Thing two I wanted to share. I'm in the process of building and launching a community around Foresight games. So some of you know one of the things I do frequently is design games for organizations to help them explore the future and explain complex issues, complex systems. And it's still a very nascent field. I'm trying to get more people involved, and I'm trying to get people to share great best practices. So if you are already designing Foresight games or curious about it, you can go to foresight.games, and there's a form to sign up, and we'll let you know. We're going to do events. We're probably going to have a Discord community or something, and share lots of tips and practices both for designing games and getting clients, that kind of thing.
What's a Foresight game?
Yeah, Foresight games that explore the future. And I can give some examples. So I've designed games around trying to predict how bad actors will use technology to manipulate elections. I've designed games trying to understand the future of money and web monetization, the future of how artificial intelligence will impact the economy, and many of these are a little bit LARPy or otherwise they drop mine at least draw heavily from indie storytelling games. So and it really varies. Like we did the AI and economics one was really fun. We designed it for the World Economic Forum and the Berkeley Center for Human Compatible Artificial Intelligence, I think was the name of that org. And we did this like 100-person event where we had famous economists and sci-fi authors playing these like little mini games to come up with positive visions of the future.
Wow.
So hoping that we're just in the very early days of what will be a very powerful way of helping organizations plan and strategize. So we shall see. But I'd love to have more folks along for the ride. That again is at foresight.games. And then the third thing, which I think is more open for discussion and beyond the hyping, is a dollop of hype and then the conversation. I've been thinking a lot about writers' room games, and I don't know if this is a term that's being used elsewhere, but games that like the main vibe of them is a group of friends, the players sitting around and mostly talking about like, where do we want to take this story? What do we think might happen next? Maybe a little bit of like retconning and stepping back and then jumping forward. Maybe people are tied to individual characters. Likely not. It depends. I think one of the things that's sort of closest here is I think a lot of the No Dice No Masters Belonging Outside Belonging games happen to they have the Idle Dreaming stage, and so there's a lot of this kind of like writer's room vibe there. And so I've been thinking about that a lot, partly through the lens of I have a game in early playtesting called Working the Case. It is a 30-minute murder mystery where done in a very writer's room style. So like technically you're all playing as the investigators, but really you're playing as the writer's room trying to create this snappy murder mystery by filling out this grid that has an intersection of 5 suspects and their motives, means, opportunities, and secret, and everybody has a secret, even if it's not the murder itself. But like the vibe is very much just like continuing to go around and find evidence, but it's all very much like, what do we think is the next most interesting thing to make keep the case moving forward, keep people keep suspicion on all the suspects, that kind of thing. So anyway, just wanted to open that for discussion and see like, what are your all thoughts on writers' room games? What are things that you've seen that really work well? to support that kind of environment.
Jeremy, what is this? It's an interesting thing because I actually, I'm trying to think because like my first inclination about at least this idea is to like it. My second one is like I kind of design against this is what I realized because I was like, oh yeah, that does sound like really fun, but then a lot of the things, at least in a couple of my games that I've designed for, is to remove that like people coming to a consensus about a thing and giving the power to each individual player in turn to say what happens.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
I don't see that as mutually exclusive. I mean, I think you can definitely empower individuals to like figure out what the next thing is, without. I'm trying. This is where like writers' room is definitely underdefined. Like when I think about it, it's more of the no one has too much fiat over any part of the story, but somebody can totally have full control over what happens next, perhaps.
Right. Yeah, because that's a thing that I found times or in playing games, times where like the table nobody wants to take a strong stance can lead to like this weird stagnation and you end up with this like mishmash of ideas that's like the watered down version of the ideas that everybody wanted to have,
Yeah, there's a
if that
reason
makes sense.
design by committee is a pejorative.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So like I love the idea. I do, if we're including taking turns of being the person that gets to say what's next, then yeah, I love this stuff because I mean, Grasping Nettles and Legend has it both follow this like nobody is in charge. We're all building something together, but it's like whenever you're putting the brick on the wall, I don't know, how do you build stuff? It's you that slathers the goop on top. It's I don't get in there with my own fuck. Mortal.
The analogy is running fast.
It's suffering.
I think you're spot
Um,
on, and in the chat, people are talking about the no communication rule from Microscope and Quiet Ear, and
Mm.
I think that helps a lot. I usually soften that slightly by saying that like the person who's in the hot seat can always ask for support, but it's on them to ask as opposed to everyone just being able to chime in all the time, depending on where you are sort of in the cycle of the game.
Yeah, that those rules are definitely interesting because I'd be surprised to ever play a game of like the Quiet Year where everybody follows that rule. I would love to try it at some point, but like it always devolves into a loud year because I know that's like part of the name of the game is that it's supposed to be like kind of a quiet, contemplative, like oh, it's your turn, draw the card, tell us what happens. The only time everybody pipes up on a turn is when somebody uses the have a discussion action, and then everybody gets one fucking sentence.
Yeah, right.
But I mean, everybody gets more than one sentence every time I've played it, and like it's very fun that way. And it, I think you need the right group of people that are like into seeing that game played the way that it's quote unquote supposed to be played in that quiet manner. And I'd like to
Yeah,
try
and
it.
I think sometimes having rules that have that a very very strong opinion to them, even if they're most often not followed, are still important for anchoring expectations, right?
Yeah, because I think even in the groups, like even the times I have played it, it's not quiet. Like Adira is saying that our quiet year games are never quiet. But it is like everybody knows that it's supposed to be. So I think there's less of the committee thing than there
People
would
are
be
primed,
maybe
yeah.
if that rule wasn't there. So yeah, that's an interesting thought on how the rules affect it even when you ignore them.
Yeah. Other things I've noticed in this, like, I don't even know if I can call this sort of like a area of design space because I haven't heard other folks using the writers room kind of framing, but it feels like things that can be really successful also include getting people like helping people come up with like obvious right ideas. There's always something they can throw out and move things forward. Oftentimes, if there's a lot of really short rounds, that's especially liberating in that um, that you can always just say the obvious thing and then your turn will come back around pretty quickly, so you don't feel like there's that much pressure on any one bit of creative addition.
Right. Yeah. And as things go on, it becomes clear that like your obvious thing and my obvious thing, those aren't the same. You're like, oh, obviously this is what happens next. Will probably blow my mind, and
Yeah.
vice versa.
I don't know if I don't think I've played or gamified anything that would be considered as a writer's room. I've moved to calling my session zeros workshop sessions instead, because I do this thing where I think we talked about this on the show before, but when I've played D&D campaigns in the past, I've often come to them with no setting at all, and except for like some pillar things I want for whatever narrative or fiction pillars that I want as the GM to instill into the play. And I often go to the player when they've designed their character of like, oh, I'm going to play a half elf ranger. Cool. Tell me about half elves and tell me about rangers. How does that happen? What does that look like? Are half elves wicked tall? Are they wicked short? Do they breathe underwater? Like, what's the whole kit and caboodle for your thoughts there? And I like to give like the player after they explain some stuff, I'll write down like the details in like small bullet points, and I'll ask them like, hey, which one of these is a hard detail for you? Like unchanging half elves have to be this way.
Mhm.
And so that way, if we come to another player who comes maybe like later in the turn, and they're also a half elf, and they have some like differentiating thoughts. It might either be that's a different halfling culture altogether, or they can sort of like meld together, but that first player still has the ability to keep the thing that's really precious to them about halflings, but everything else they've given up to be malleable. Like these are all soft. You can sort of like change out words or something like that. And I really like to like that feels very writer's roomy to me. And then we also sort of discuss, I'm a very like behind the curtain, like reveal behind the curtain sort of GM. And I'm like, hey, this is the story I have intention for. Do you have anything to add? I think I was recently running a Theros game. Anyone familiar? Theros is Magic the Gathering's Sword and Sandals, like Greek mythology inspired setting. And I had my big hard detail was that I wanted all the characters to be a type of people called the Returned, which are basically zombies with no souls or memories. And so their whole shtick of the game was going to be finding their memories. So then I asked them, like, what kind of lives did you have before? We did like flashback dream sequence stuff. Anyways, this is all to like full circle back to I think this is something I do naturally, which is like a writer's room sort of thing. Everything's always up for retcon. I tell people like I care about continuity, but I don't care about continuity. Like if it feels like it's roadblocking you and it's not roadblocking you in a way that you have to like overcome a challenge, but it's just sort of like preventing you from being creative, then we can like blow it up.
Totally. Yeah, I feel like there's a way of blowing it up too that's very writers roomy. That like we'll retcon it or we'll recontextualize what happened in the past so that that we can enable the creative thing you want to do, but keep the story sort of cogent. Because I think again in all these games having some degree of feeling like there's a consistent set of rules for how the game is working and how the characters interrelate is important, at least for me, for staying like invested in the story. And so I think like retconning is such a powerful tool there,
Yeah.
the recontextualizing.
Yeah, I think what's the most important part, like if anyone is wondering like, well, isn't that just like really soft, gooey ooze? And like, sure, maybe, but I think
Wait.
if the things you keep hard are like the setting details of like, you know, we could say magic comes from crystals, right? So that's like a thing that establishes fairness. It's like a hard magic system. So we're saying if someone doesn't have a crystal, they can't engage in magic. And we're all handshaking about that. Like, oh yes, yeah, handshake, crystals, magic. Yeah, cool.
My
So I think
bones
if
are
you
made of crystal.
Huh?
My bones are made of
Huh?
crystal. My bones.
God damn it. My bones?
My bones are
Sure,
made of crystal.
maybe that's the story. Everyone's trying to hunt you down because they want your precious bone crystals. I would make it happen. You're getting bounty hunters, dude. You're like, oh, I'm all powerful. Sick. Everyone wants your all powerful ability. So think about that. But but yeah, I think
doorbell ringing furiously on my end. I apologize. I'm gonna go get that. But thank you for having me on the show.
oh
And should continue the conversation. I just feel bad.
You're good.
Oh, you're good.
Yeah, if you got real life thing to deal with, you got to deal with it.
All right, take care, y'all. I'll catch
Yeah.
you on the show again sometime soon.
Yeah, talk to you
Bye,
later.
Randy. Yeah, Crystal Bones Bell. But yeah, I think it's important for like, even if you never like sort of understood what makes a fictional world fair, and this is maybe just my opinion of it. I don't know if this is like a quick and dirty rule, but I always feel like if you can find the fictional pillars that you've all sort of like agreed to at the table, as long as those don't change, you won't come to like much friction about changing anything else, right? So like how you've established maybe like trade works, or maybe a particular like type of enemy, like, oh, zombies are always weak to holy damage.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, that makes cognitive sense to me, and that we all agree that's fair. And like maybe there's something about necro damage, etc., whatever.
Right. Yeah. Maybe fair isn't the right word, but like keeping it like I don't setting these like narrative precedences for things so that yeah, if like the GM later pulls something out, like, oh, actually the zombie can't. What was the zombie immune to?
Nothing. Weak
Okay.
to holy. What was the zombie?
Oh.
A zombie.
If you don't do holy, and it's like it doesn't really work. It's this fucking zombie mate.
Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah, I mean, fair is one word, but there's precedence for that. It's not just a gotcha. Like, oh wait, you weren't supposed to beat these.
Yeah. Yeah. Hold on.
Hang on a minute. I just realized the chat on the screen is broken, probably because we changed names. That's something for next week. Mark it down.
Something for next week. That's not a right now problem. That's a later problem.
That's a later problem.
Yeah, we have so many right now problems that there's so many other later problems, right?
Yeah. Well, should we move on to the next?
Yeah, I think we got a cool caller coming up.
I think so too. I do believe it. Hello, welcome back to the Tabletop Call-In Show.
Hello.
What's going on?
Hello.
Hi, I'm Adira.
Hi, Adira.
Hi. So, fuck whatever Randy was talking about. Let's talk about Root.
Okay.
Right back, baby.
Okay. So, Jeremy, what factions have you played as Root in Root? Just the Corvids, just once?
I've played the Corvid once, I've played the Eerie once, and I've fantasized about the Vagabond several times.
Okay. How familiar are you with the point-based system in the back of the Root rulebook for determining a group of balanced factions?
I'm pretty familiar. I looked at it a lot of times because we had a 5-person game last night, so I was like, I wanted to make sure that it was a good combination.
It's
the
so
reach
cool.
table or whatever.
Yeah, I love it, and I love that specific way of like thinking about asymmetry when it comes to like a tabletop game and things like that. I recently got high and watched the Hobbit movies, which are bad, I was thinking about like how would I make a Hobbit role playing game, because that's often what I do when I consume a piece of media.
Yeah,
and it then linked me back to the Root reach table, right? Because so like the key ingredient to a game of Root is enough factions that are about having dudes on the map, and enough factions that are about doing little weird fiddly shit and weird nonsense. That like disrupt these larger factions from like the cats in base Root just like start literally everywhere on the board. And it's neat because you just sort of start and you're already losing. You had everything and now you are losing everything. It's so then when I was thinking about like the traditional fantasy adventure game, right? So you've got your cleric, your fighter, your rogue, whatnot. Those niches are sort of too balanced, you know? And I don't think that really accurately like represents how people in like sort of storybook sort of style fantasy, when you get to like the Hobbit and stuff like that, how it's like Gandalf's like a fucking nonsense crazy wizard, and like
Yeah, 10 points, Marquis Day Cats.
yeah, exactly. And like there's just like a million of these fuck off random dwarfs like Biffer and Bofer and whatnot. And it's like none of them matter. Uh, they're a lot less points than Gandalf. What if you had a character where, all right, I'm playing Gandalf and I'm playing 7 dwarves? Yeah,
That's good. I want to be, one person had like, I agree. Here's the thing. I've also, since I saw the reach table, thought a lot about like Umbral Dive and
Yeah.
how to structure like a dungeon
Uh-huh,
and like its complexity, because I don't want to do leveling up in Umbral Dive. I want you to have
yeah.
all your tools available to you, and just the amount of tools that you can have at one time
For sure.
is like the level of progression. So like if your table is like not hyper into tactical play, maybe you stick to tier 1, and that means each character only gets like 3 or 4 abilities, and then the monsters also only get like 2 or 3 abilities or something like that. And if you want to play like tier 4, then like you can use 8 different things, and then all the monsters have like variant abilities and reaction abilities and stuff like
Here's the
that.
thing. I'm really into tactical play,
Yeah.
and I don't want to have a million things to do. That's
Sure.
part of what draws me to tactical play for a lot of different things is the limited abilities and resources of the specific units. Like I don't really play minis competitively now, but I used to play like miniature games competitively. Um, and like you would have specific pieces that why it was interesting and why the game felt neat. It's just like, all right, I've got this big dude who's like a fucking half mechanical Robo Spider. Like he chopped off his legs and he's got like 6 Robo Spider legs now, and he's big and massive. And he's like big and stompy, but the he can't like do a bunch of stuff. Like the game is soccer. Like we're playing soccer, and he's a big Robo Spider. He's like all right at kicking the ball. But like he's like mostly just sort of good at like holding the ball and being like, I'm a big Robo Spider and I have the ball. Come to fucking take it from me, you asshole. Like he didn't score points. He would like pass it off to like one of my like fast little dudes who would score points. So like when I think about tactical combat and I think about like why I like the reach table in Root is because the reach table represents the sort of like each of these factions has a different niche that they occupy, right? And some of them sort of take up more narrative space effectively, as in space on the board. And like by balancing for how much space there is available, that makes it a lot more interesting to me. Am I making any sense?
Yeah, I
feel that.
I was
I was
thinking about it in a way of like a deck builder, right? Like
Sure.
when, for anyone who hasn't seen the reach table, it has 2 kind of sets to it. One set is like how many players you have, and that equivocates to how many total points or what the point minimum is per factions you have in the game. So if you have a 2-player game, the amount of factions you have in combination must add up to greater than 17 points. I think it is. I'm kind of making that up,
Where
but
is this in this game?
it's on the last page
Of the laws?
It's on the last inlet.
Yeah.
Oh, you have the I remember you have the Kickstarter version or something like that. I got the one from the store, and it has an updated rules of law, so it shows all of the. Yeah, you don't have it in your book.
Okay.
Yeah.
I bought this game too early.
If you
Yeah.
get one of the expansions, they have the updated rules. You
Yeah.
can also just download the updated rules
Oh yeah.
from their website.
Because
Yeah.
when this conversation started, I pulled my copy out and have been losing my mind trying to figure out what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah. Speaking of the laws of root, I just love the dual rulebook setup.
Yes.
Yes. I keep having ideas for role-playing games where I want to use the dual rulebook setup, like specifically because of my experiences with Root and Twilight Imperium.
Specific like reference rules, and then one that's like an example of play sort of thing, which is really
Also,
it's cool.
It's just fun to be like, according to rule 1.3.5.
Yeah.
The first draft of No Stone Unturned had paragraph numbering like that way back when I was still hadn't done very much game writing at all, and I kind of wish I stuck to it because it's just fun to say. Yeah, rule 14.1.6 says that you have to roll a d8 when you're feeling sad.
Yeah.
It's so I wrote this sex game called Robert's Rules of Orgy, which is a parliamentary procedure for group sex. And I kept the little number things that Robert's Rules of Order does, and it was a lot of fun. Just like playing with that assumption of like the dryness of little numbers, and then like the wackiness of debate fucking. Yeah.
But to continue, if anyone's not seen the table,
You both just sort of stood there and nodded.
I've not read it. But
you don't have to. No one ever has to read any game that I mention.
I don't think that's true. But the second part of the table is that each of the factions that are out per the rules of law in the most standard edition, although there's a Marauders expansion coming out, so that's probably going to change, has a list of all the factions, and each of the factions have point totals. So the Marquis des Cats, which have a big influence on the board, that when they start the game with a unit in every single clearing, and plus they start with some buildings right off the rip. And they're worth 10 points. So they count towards the 10-point total of your game. And right underneath them are the Moles of Duchy, which also have big influence. They do like burrowing. They have their own unique home base clearing that's off the map that no one can interfere with. And they're worth 8 points. So like in a 2-player game, you satisfy the requirements by picking just the cats and just the moles. And that's what you would typically play with. And part of it is that I think what it is, and I think you said this a little bit earlier, Adira, but it's like the amount of interactivity different faction combinations would have with each other. Yeah. So as an opposite example, what wouldn't satisfy that 2-player requirement is like the Woodland Alliance, which spreads sympathy through the woods, and like if an enemy faction ever crosses into a sympathy zone, they must give that particular faction cards. But if you're playing with the Corvids, who don't really maneuver around the map, and they also place tokens, like the Woodland Alliance isn't going to get the uses of their sympathy. They're not really going to have a reason to like build bases or officers. Like they don't really interact with each other. So that, and they have like really low numbers. I think the Corvid have like 3, and the Woodland Alliance also have 3, and that's only 6. So what it's saying is like, this game is asymmetrical, but it's designed in such a way that not all these factions create a satisfying game together on their own. They need certain like bigger factions in play so they can, like you said, I think it's what you said about like there's all these little factions that goof up or disrupt the actions of the larger play it factions. So you need those big factions, otherwise the disrupt mechanics for the smaller factions don't really work without them.
Yeah, and basically I was trying to tie how Root represents the like reach table as how much board real estate sort of factions are able to take up, and sort of tying that to like the narrative weight of different sorts of playbooks, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, sure, like people love being the protagonist, which I don't get. I think being a protagonist is pretty fucking boring.
I'm all about the villain play, dude. That's why I DM.
I mean, I've played basically exclusively villains and LARPs for years. But being a like secondary character is really fucking fun. And like it's there was this Blades in the Dark game that was on Zine Quest 2 years ago, maybe, that was about one of the characters was just legitimately like they're the heir to the kingdom, and like you're all the plucky adventurers who are trying to overthrow the evil king and get this heir installed. But one of you, like that guy's the protagonist. I forget what it was called.
Is that Rebel Crown? Is that a game?
What'd you say, Aaron?
Rebel
Adam?
Crown?
That sounds right. Yeah.
Oh, Jason
Rebel
Bosworth
Crown?
just said Rebel Crown in the chat too, so maybe we're onto something here.
Yes. Yes. Rebel Crown.
Why do I know that? I've barely ever heard of this game.
Because it's a neat Forge in the Dark game, you know?
Yeah, I haven't read it. I want to read it. I guess maybe that's it. It's just in the back of my brain in the large pile of games that I would like to check out.
I have a physical copy of it somewhere in my fucking house, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, and so like taking the reach table from Root, right, and applying and like thinking about like the space that a character takes up, and just like leaning and being like, no, like if either of you ever see the 80s fantasy movie Lady Hawk?
Mm-mm.
Okay, well, so there are like 3 characters in that movie basically. There's the magic lady, and there's the warrior guy, and then there's Mouse, and Mouse is just sort of a shitbag thief, and Mouse has no narrative weight compared to these 2 other characters. They're like intertwined lovers, and at night he is a wolf, and at day she is a hawk, and you know all that fucking nonsense. And so like the 2 of them would be very high reach playbooks, and then you could just play a satisfying game with just the 2 of them. You don't need Mouse. But by having that extra little supporting character in there, it's like, oh, but the dynamics are pushed and pulled, and sure, it's a movie, so Mouse is a lens through which the audience is able to like like understand the conflict and like learn about the magic and whatnot, and the why are they cursed to not be together, you know. Yeah, and it's like I don't know. I think oftentimes people will look at like balance and get the wrong ideas around it, you know?
Yeah.
Like
yeah. Like everything has to be perfectly balanced to play against each other. Is kind of like the standard line of thinking on it, but like, I mean, no.
Yeah, really. It doesn't, and one of those great reasons is because role-playing games are played by people. And so you can just talk to them. And if someone's hogging the spotlight, you tell them to stop.
Right.
Because they're not being a good friend.
That's not very nice. Let me try. Yeah.
Yeah, Root has tickled the brain. Root's put roots in the juice.
Root planted roots in the juice. That's quite the sentence. Yeah, I want to get into at some point some more asymmetrical stuff with like both game mechanically asymmetrical, but this
Uh-huh.
narrative asymmetry that you're kind of gesturing at here is super
Yeah,
fascinating.
because I personally find narrative asymmetry much more interesting than mechanical asymmetry when it comes to role playing games.
Mhm.
Because like you can do mechanical asymmetry in a number of interesting ways, but like it's much harder to do narrative asymmetry in other media.
Mm-hmm.
In like a satisfying collaborative way. But like
Yeah.
role playing games, I feel like allow you to really push that narrative asymmetry, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, like World of Warcraft, right? Every character in World of Warcraft is the hero that saves Azeroth.
And there's millions of them.
Yeah.
For now.
They're not really able to have these characters interact with each other, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So they're not really able to pull off that narrative asymmetry, but they are able to do mechanical asymmetry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In Final Fantasy 14, what's interesting is that they actually write the other. You're called the Warrior of Light for anyone who doesn't play Final Fantasy games, and while you are like the same thing in WoW, this like sort of the single protagonist sort of thing. What's interesting is that when you do dungeons or raids or trials, the idea is that you're actually pulling on warriors of lights from different timelines and parallel universes, which I find really fascinating. Like
Yeah, I
that
was
they
wondering
considered.
because I've watched you
Yeah.
do at least one raid or whatever the hell, and it's just billions of dudes just slamming on this large monster. It's like, you're not a hero.
Yeah.
You're facing a crowd.
But yeah, it's like you can't do it by yourself. So like you need the other warriors' experience and like narratively experience and thoughts like overtake this enemy or something like that. Which I find is an interesting contrast, like how WoW approaches their narrative, and like in the narrative there's only like one superhero, but in Final Fantasy there have always been other superheroes. You just have to be able to call them from their own journeys.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've taken up enough of your time because there's another person who wants to talk to y'all.
There is.
There is.
Yeah. So, happy Valentine's Day.
Valentine's
I know
Day.
both of you have partners, and I hope that you're able to hug and kiss them and have a wonderful day with both of them.
Yeah, same to you.
Same to you. Thank you, Adira.
Yeah, bye.
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 All right. One last caller to rule them all. Discord user,
Discord
user,
Discord
Aaron
user.
Clown. I'm glad we were in the same place with that.
Yeah.
Hello. Welcome to the Tabletop Colin Show. You're way off centered because your name is huge. Let me fix that. What's going on?
That's all right. Nothing much. How are y'all doing?
Doing good. Getting through it.
Pretty good.
I feel like my brain's been a little bit on the slower end, but hopefully nobody else but me has noticed.
Yeah.
That's
I will
okay.
actually right back.
Oh, Jeremy's out of here. Okay. What were you gonna say?
Was it something I said?
I'm not sure. Maybe.
Anyways, we'll just have to fill space, I guess.
I suppose.
Hello. Hi, I'm Aaron.
Hi, Aaron. I'm Adam.
Yeah, I don't know whether we should wait or just start
just
talking,
go for it.
and we'll fill Jeremy in once he gets back.
Anybody that listens on the podcast thing doesn't know that Jeremy has literally left the screen, so we just keep going. I think now they know.
Yep. I called in because I think Adira has already talked about like the asymmetric design thing, right? And like narrative asymmetry and mechanical asymmetry, which is really interesting, like considerations for like tabletop RPG design. And I was like gonna ask about the other thing that kind of tied into your earlier like banter talking about root, right? It's like stuff that you are excited to pull on from like other games. You know, like board game mechanics that you're excited to kind of play with or expand on in like um, uh, other forms, like in tabletop RPGs, for example.
Yeah.
I know you have been doing quite a bit. Like you have a rondel game,
Yeah.
which if like people aren't familiar with rondels, like that's a very like classic like board game mechanic.
Mm. Yeah, which if you're not familiar with rondels or the wheel from Grasping Nettles, that's the thing. That's what it is. I originally was just calling it the rondel, rondel, but I figured people
I don't know.
didn't
I
know what
say
it is.
rondel.
I don't know. I don't even know how to spell it. That was the other reason I just stopped calling it that, because I've seen I've seen like roundel
Yeah. Yes.
with a U with no U.
Yeah.
I have kind of a funny answer to this,
Mm.
which Jeremy, Aaron wants to talk about, like what mechanics from other board games are you looking at to steal?
Hell yeah.
My funny answer is I was watching the big football game yesterday, and like the narrative potential of like the format of football, of the you get 4 tries to advance a short distance, or you have to give it over.
Yeah.
That it feels like you could definitely make a football 2-player RPG without calling it. This is American football without calling it that, because it is. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just like a weird turn-based thing where both players or teams, I guess, both players are engaging in this head-to-head constantly,
Yeah.
and I don't know. I feel like I kind of want to make a game that is fully based on the rules of American football, but like never mention that that's what's happening. Because it's just a very good tug of war core system.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't have to be board games, right? Like I think there's a lot of stuff that like we're stealing from video games and from, like you said, even sports and like traditional like
Mhm.
games. There's it's not so much about stealing, right? But it's about recontextualizing them, because like one of the things that people get really like laser focused on is like, oh, this is a board game thing, this is a sports thing, whereas like game design is a pretty wide purview. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm curious, Jeremy. You have something that you're excited about, um, like pulling from?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So a lot of my tech comes more from video games than board games, and I don't engage. Not that I don't engage, but I don't have a sick ton of like board game experience. Like I've done stuff like the classics, Ticket to Ride and Cranium and shit like that. So unfortunately, I think my answer is gonna lean. Is okay if it leans to video games. Is that all right?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Although I will say for Root, I really enjoy the conversation we had with Adira about like point totals, kind of determining what can be done for your specific play group. So if you're like playing with 5 players, or excuse me, if you're playing like a less amount of players, maybe the maybe the ranger class like isn't available for whatever reason, like just its set of mechanics require like it's this idea of like in Root it's like a competitive aspect, you want people to interact, but maybe if you're playing in a smaller person game, maybe clerics aren't a good class to play in a smaller player game because they require people to
You know,
heal and people to buff, and
yeah,
like they have a lot of supportive mechanics which don't do well if you only have one other person to support or something. Like just building around that sort of thought was really interesting.
yeah, like social deduction games, right? They usually limit like what kind of rules get
Yes.
put into games depending on player count or the type of experience you're after. Like when you say for like something like two rooms and a boom, for example, it's like, okay, I want the more interactive, let's everyone talk. I want the more backstabby, everyone doesn't can never trust what anyone's saying. There's different
I
combinations
want
that
to.
you
I want
like
to add the
preset. Yeah.
ones like the clown where somebody just has to smile the whole time
Yeah.
or can't speak. So then you get a bunch of weirdos bluffing that they're the clown, and it's just a room full of people doing this. You can't see me, but I'm smiling horribly.
Yeah. Like stealing from game shows and like reality TV is like interesting as well. Yeah.
But on the video game front, I know everything about God of War now. I know literally everything about the making of God of War.
Yeah.
But yes, I do. One thing that I found really interesting is how they designed for. I'm speaking specifically about God of War 4, the reboot of the series. And if anyone's not played, without spoilers, Kratos, the God of War, has a son named Atreus, who he takes on this journey to help him grow as a demigod, and it also helps Kratos grow as a father figure. And but in the game mechanically, I learned that when they were designing Atreus, they didn't want Atreus to feel like they were getting in the player's way, but they also didn't want Atreus to have be so far in the background that they like you would never care what the fuck Atreus was doing. And Atreus was pivotal to the story. So they did this thing where first of all, Atreus needed to be there at all times to help you. So when you're actually not looking at Atreus at any time on the screen, Atreus's model will warp just outside the edge of your screen and then walk in to do like an action. So Atreus will always be there. And I find this interesting thing there of like, how do we I want like in Umbral Dive, I want like positioning and stuff to matter, but I also don't want it to be so rigid that like if you're too far away from your allies or something, you can't do anything. So I think about like just that concept of like always being able to be there when you can. And maybe that's like a general mechanic of like, oh, if you're ever too far away from an ally or you're rushing to the rescue, you'll get there in the nick of time and you get like a speed bonus movement or something like that. But just these like taking these like weird coding shortcuts that video games take and seeing how you can like gamify those or like narratively fold those things into like a battle game, like a skirmish game. That way you don't ever feel like you have no options. I think for me, like actually I played a session of Strixhaven a while back. Again, Magic the Gathering setting, Harry Potter style bullshit. But it was for D&D. I have friends that very much like all the D&D setting books. But we played a game of Strixhaven and we got to a battle and I was playing this paladin character. Paladin level 1 doesn't really have a lot going on for it outside of just attacking and lay on hands. And I went to go attack the thing and I missed my attack. Like on my pass fail 50-50 chance BS, I missed my attack and like I didn't do anything for 2 total rounds because I kept missing. And that doesn't feel good. I'm like, I'm not doing anything here. I can't even grapple this son of a bitch. Like, so I like the concept. I think a mechanic that I want to steal is how do we get to a consensus of like, you're always able to be there when you can. And maybe that's not the most efficient or optimal thing you can do, but at least you'll be able to do something, period. Like your turn is never forfeit. Because I think that feels really bad. Even regardless of cooperative or competitive.
There are a couple of, I know the Veil has this. There are a couple of Powered by the Apocalypse games that have moves. I think the Veil has it. The Sprawl might.
I think the
have
Sprawl,
it,
yeah.
That is just, you can spend this resource to just be in a scene, even if it makes no fucking sense for you to appear. You're there. Like narratively, they need you. Somebody's dying or whatever. You can just be there. You bust in the door. And so that feels like it's in the same vein as you. And I don't know if there would ever be anybody that would like hear that move being triggered and be like, well, it doesn't make sense. But it's because the game is telling you it doesn't need to make sense. It's cool as hell.
Yeah.
And so yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
the little tricks video games do to keep you engaged, like you were saying with the character teleporting to just outside your view and then walking in. Video games
Yeah.
are doing that kind of bullshit all the time,
Yeah.
and we
Yeah.
should too.
And it
makes
feels
me
good.
Yeah.
right. It makes me think of a thing I brought up that I still do want to steal. If I ever make a tactical RPG, I will definitely be stealing the whole thing that a lot of video games do, where you do this big fight and you like slaughter everybody, and then it cuts back to canon, and they're just like, "Wow, that was a good fight," and nobody's dead.
Yeah.
You just won the battle. The fight itself is like complete bullshit, and then it cuts back to like implying that what happened was you got in like a regular fight where nobody got stabbed or like punched to death. You just
Yeah.
won a fight. What happens next?
A second
that's really
thing,
good.
the second thing I was thinking about just now that Adam's thing triggered was, I also know a lot about Doom now. Also, Doom 2016, and
Board game?
one of the, huh?
Oh,
What
sorry.
was that?
Doom the video game.
Yes, Doom 2016, the video game. For the pacing of their game, they do, if you can imagine, whenever a level starts, they have arenas and then they have transition fights. And I think that's really interesting of something that I want to steal, especially for like an adventure fantasy game where like you have a room that has a set style of like gimmicks and mechanics as these specific enemy spawns. But I would love to also include like you have to fight, through goblins in a hallway before you get to the next arena. But I want to create mechanics that keeps that also as like snappy as just walking down that hallway, right? So like the arena, you're really invested in like these big mechanical showcase set piece fights, and then on the in-betweens you have like these maybe smaller set of mechanics or more minimal mechanics where like, yeah, how many goblins do you swath down on the way through. Also kind of taking from like Metroidvania stuff where like enemies are resources. So like maybe there's like a conversation of like however many you can take down on your transition decides how much like health packs you get or whatever, like whatever the resource is. I find that really fascinating. Like big arena set piece fights, then smaller, more minimal mechanic transition fights where you like sort of just, in video games it'd be like a platforming thing or like a speed run sort of style thing, and then you get to the next arena and you have your big set piece like galaxy brain figure out the mechanics thing. Those are my answers.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, it's really interesting, especially with the space of like board game adaptations of video games as well. There's and vice versa. There's some really interesting things to look at in that space because of like how like the stance of board games is this reducibility of the world, right? Like there's a there's a worldview within like board game design that like things that systems are things that can like simplify and emulate and reduce the world to like emulatable things, and that kind of like approach from the maximalist like simulation to that video games allow, to the like, look, we have to like really hit on like what the mechanic makes you feel rather than like what it literally simulates, right? And board games have been getting way better at doing that design in recent years, like as the field has like expanded, right? And I think it's definitely ripe for a lot of crossovers between like to tabletop RPGs, because like we realize that like in a lot of storytelling, or a lot of ways that we look at storytelling, or considering that storytelling is potentially one thing that you want from RPGs, often you're not that concerned with the mechanics of things, right? Like it's cool that that the the battle played out in this cinematic way for a movie. But it's no one is going there simulating. Oh, you need exactly this amount of warriors, otherwise this doesn't make sense. No. It's as long as it feels right. Um, that then it's fine to use, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so I feel like there's been a lot of the adoption of that kind of um, design philosophy from board games, and yeah, I'm keen to see like what things that we can do with that. Like now that there's a great like there's a great design field that we can kind of like lean on, you
Mhm.
know, like hey, if they are solving these problems, what other problems can we solve, right? And like, hey, I'm just gonna steal this, like the classic thing of like using Jenga in Dread, right? It's not a board game design. They're not, Jenga wasn't designed as a horror game.
But it
Even though
works.
it kind of, yeah, but it works. But like it's like finding like that if you can find these kind of like I don't know what's the word for it, like where they resonate and like you're able to um uh like pull on these things that other people are already doing design work and design explorations on, and like looking at like, how they like looking at like how Root and Vast deal with asymmetric design, and like pushing the limits of how much you can put into someone's um like experience of a game, right?
Yeah.
Like seeing that jump from Vast to Root, for example, was really fascinating to see how they kind of like succeeded where the previous one was more of a interesting. I mean, I don't think it's a failure. A lot of people loved Vast, but like I thought it was like a missed opportunity on like how much more complex like some roles were. Um, and yeah, like seeing like you taking some of those like explorations and like iterating on them in tabletop RPGs, I think is a really fruitful space because of like that kind of aligned goals there.
Mhm.
Because they're often working with very sorry, maybe not aligned goals, because often a lot of board games goals are very divergent from what you want out of tabletop RPGs. But like
Yeah,
there's yeah.
there's like a lot of you can use a lot of the same tools, but like the goals of an RPG design versus a board game design are very different, and often mean like a take on a mechanic that would be very good in a board game wouldn't actually be that great in an RPG zone because it's like
Yeah.
too deterministic a lot of the times. Whereas something that's good in an RPG wouldn't be very good in board games a lot of the times. For example, I mean like the classic thing is rolling dice. Like if you had a board game, a modern board game where you rolled any combination of dice and like the result of that told you what happened no matter what. That I don't think people in the board game zone would necessarily like that unless there were a lot of different scaffolds to like adjust the dice rolls or whatever else, because it's too random. So
Yeah.
you need to build up a lot around preventing that randomness or like dealing with that randomness in some way. But in an RPG setting, like we fucking love that. we prefer it whenever there is at least sometimes moments where we just leave the decision entirely to fate, to chance.
Mm.
Um, and so like recognizing all of the little differences like that, and it's not as simple as what I'm saying. There are obviously board games that do really well with purely random mechanics, but like you do need to like design it very deliberately. Whereas in an RPG, if you take out all of the randomness, that can go well, but like you have to be more, I think, deliberate about taking out that randomness than you would in a board game where like I don't know. I feel like I'm losing that point a little bit, but like certain mechanics you feel like you need to add to board games to make them good. What am I saying?
Board games thrive, quote unquote,
uh,
thrive in an environment where you can make choices and future decisions. Like you can plan out roles or card uses or something like that. And they don't necessarily love like a lot of a huge amount of emergent space. Whereas like RPGs, because they're story-based, fictional-based, narrative setting, and we don't really like understand how the world will react because the game hasn't told us explicitly how that works, uses that uncertainty to then make narrative decisions of like, oh, this is a positively charged result, or this is a negatively charged result, or this result means that I have to interact with this person or something like that, or I have to make overcome some sort of challenge. So like uncertainty is good in role playing because it helps take some of the amorphous decision fatigue that can come from that space. Whereas in board games, if you had that much uncertainty, you would never feel like you were in control of your victory or your loss, which is more of like the condition of board games, a sort of like win-lose scenario, or an end state that relates to winning or losing generally.
I think maybe that fatigue is what that brought it to me, because RPGs rely heavily on the quote-unquote randomization of human creativity. Like you can do, like the whole sell of it is that you could do anything, you say what your character is going to do, and then we figure out the result of that. Whereas in a board game, the rules tell you what you can do. Like if I'm playing Cosmic Encounter, a pretty open game with a lot of weird randomness that I love, if you like the things that you can do are still okay. On my turn, I can send my ships to a planet that the game tells me to send them to. Whereas in a sci-fi role-playing game, not, it's, I don't know, we get on our ship and we go to like, we're looking for a garbage dump. We want to dig around in a garbage dump today. And it's, maybe the game designer never thought the players were going to go to a garbage dump, and it's fine. It still works because like the mechanics are all about like pulling things out of weird randomness. I don't know. Yeah, it's something. There's just differences, and they're super interesting to explore, I think.
Yeah. Cool.
Sick.
Great. I like board games, and I want to use them
I like board games. Yep.
in my RPGs. I think that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah. Cool. All right. I think that's all from me. Yeah.
Aaron, do you have anything to plug?
More. Yeah. You can find more stuff that I do on. I release most of my games on itch. So ehronlime.itch.io. That's where my games stuff happens.
Cool.
All
right. Thanks for the show.
Great. Thanks for chatting with us. Thanks for sending me on a path of trying to explain myself. All right. Well,
ciao.
Hey, thank you.
I think that's gonna be it for us here at the Tabletop Call-In Show, presented to you by HaveYouPlayedThis.com. Yeah, that's gonna be all. Let me sit up. What am I doing? I'm too busy hanging out. That's gonna be all for everybody at the Tabletop Call-In Show. We have been here live talking to the fine callers that have called in. Thanks to all three of you today. I am Adam Bell. You can find me on Twitter at adamebell.com. You can get my games at adamebell.games, or slide in on the last 24 hours of my Kickstarter for Legend Has It at kickstarter.adamebell.games. That's, yeah. Jeremy?
I've been Jeremy Gage. You can find me at JeremyGage5 over on Twitter. You can listen to the Draw Your Dice podcast, where you'll get updates for Umbral Dive, as well as interviews with really cool designers. We got one with Gem Room Games about 9 Lives of Valhalla coming up soon. And go to HaveYouPlayedThis.com to listen to that podcast, so long as it exists on Spotify, at least until we figure out personal RSS feed bullshit. Newsletter stuff.
Games news coming tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
HaveYouPlayedThis.com. We will be there. We'll be chatting about stuff that's going on. And that's going to be it. That's us. I gotta I gotta go. Bye, Jeremy. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.